when we move to a bit higher level in our repertoire, the sound work is the most important work that you going to occupy yourself with. After you learn the notes, after you memorize the piece, it's going to be all about the sound, and it's a hard work, but it's really, really worth it. So essentially what you're trying to teach yourself is to teach your fingertip to have just this right memory, right, of how you create each sound, what you expect. So it's a bit of a mystery. I actually don't know exactly how it works, but all I know that once you really polish, you paid attention to every single note, and you know what to expect, right, from your fingers, then they eventually just create this memory, and every time you perform it, it's going to be just the sound that you have created and you worked for. So this is lecture number 2. We are continuing to talk about sound on Piano Excellence for Life 6-month course. In this lecture, we're going to talk more about the physical aspects of making a good sound. But first, let's actually start with our instrument. Remember, on the first lecture, I talked about 3 most important elements: is knowing your instrument and how it works. Number 2 is to actually study the work that you are playing in great detail. And number 3 is the pianist itself, himself or herself, and their skill. So let's just talk briefly about our wonderful instrument. There is a problem with our instrument, and it's a blessing and a curse. It is very easy to make a sound on the piano. So what happens is you press the key, and then the hammer hits the string, and that's pretty much it. And I think probably this is the easiest instrument, even though it's the king of all instruments. But please don't tell it to a violinist or flutist. But this is the king of instruments. But it's probably the easiest one to make a sound. So if you, for example, take a violin or take trumpet or trombone or French horn, and you will try to make a sound, just one sound, just play a note, it will be extremely difficult. With us, it's very easy, right? So even 1-year-old, 2-year-old just come and easily make a sound. So on one hand, that's great, right? Less problems. But on the other hand, it's actually, it is a problem, because we pianists, we are not really occupied enough with how we create a sound. So we forget that sound needs to be created, and we have to still put some effort into creating a good sound. Let's continue and talk about the physical aspect of creating a good sound. So first of all, we need to understand what to do with our body, right? In a way that if our body is very tense and kind of locked, whether it's our hand or our shoulders, right, or even the back, you cannot create a good sound. So good sound can be created when body is more or less relaxed. And the more relaxed it is, the better sound you will have. Let's actually start from basics, but this is something that I personally think about every single day when I sit down and practice. So you want to make sure you're not sitting too close, and you want to make sure you're not sitting too far away. So the ideal position is this. You're going to sit on the edge of the bench, right? It will immediately help you have a straighter back, and straight back is very important. Then you need to see if you're sitting too close, actually sit maybe a bit too close. So try to lock your hands in a fist and just touch the floorboard. If you're able to touch it and your hand is straight, that means it's perfect. If this is what is happening with your elbows, you're bending your elbows, you're sitting too close. If you cannot reach, you're sitting too far away. It's very easy. And eventually you will actually have a good sense as you practice more, whether you're sitting too close or too far away. So the back, again, needs to be completely straight, and your shoulders want to be very loose. And I love the expression of my dear professor, Dr. Robin McCabe. She always say liquid shoulders, liquid shoulders. And actually it reminds me the analogy that I've read in some of the books about pedagogy, about the art of teaching piano. So there was this really phenomenal pianist who taught children from actually very, very early age. And this is what she would say to kids, but I like this analogy very, very much, even for grown-ups. So imagine that on your back, in the middle of your back, there is a lake. And the water, this living water from this lake, is going through your shoulders and through your elbows, and then through your wrist and through your fingertip. So this is just not only liquid shoulders, but actually the entire arm is, so to speak, liquid. So if you actually try to comfortably hand your hand on your other hand and just really feel the heaviness of your arm, right? This is the feeling that you want to seek each and every time you play piano. The ideal sound production comes from completely relaxed arm, right? You want to make sure your armpit is never locked, and then you also never have those chicken wings elbows. So here the elbow is pretty free, and it sometimes reminds me of when people dance, say like ballroom dance, right? So they have this frame in their body. The body is not random or whatever, right? There's always some kind of frame. So that's what we do at the piano as well. You want to make sure that your elbows is not like, okay, this is the right position, the teacher said to do that. No, it needs to be somewhat still natural and still loose, but you don't want it to be hanging like this too. So if I tell you that the hand has to be 100% relaxed, I'll be lying to you, because if your hand is 100% relaxed, you cannot even grab a pen, right? It's impossible. So of course there will be a little bit of this physical tension, but that's what we experience, right, when we actually doing something and grabbing something with our hands. So relaxed elbow, still enough space right here. If it's if your body is a house, the windows need to be open, right? There should be some space here. And hand position. What you want, you don't want to play with the wrist like this, right? So you wanted to create some kind of nice bridge right here. So you don't want to play like that either. So it really has to be sort of straight. Then you want to be able to see all your knuckles. If you don't, right, and the hand is like this, that's also not a good position. All of those things are important, not because they look good or there's certain standards, right, what hand position should look like, but literally it is in order to create a good sound, right, you have to have a good hand position. We always used to say that hand position is always better when it's around. Again, depending on the size of your hands, sometimes this point can be stretched a little bit, but it needs to be round. And check that all the fingers are becoming the same length, right? The problem with our hand is that this finger, that finger, 5 and 1 are shorter. So, but imagine yourself walking with, God forbid, with one leg is shorter than the other. You cannot run, right? For example, it's impossible. So you'll not be able to walk very fast. So if you are in a situation where like this finger thumb and finger 5 are shorter, they are laying on the key, that will again disable you from playing fast, right? So what you want to do is create a position where every single finger is in same length. Now, from good hand position, let's go back to the sound. Again, everything we do, it is the purpose of it to create a beautiful sound matter, right, that we are creating at the piano. For example, if you are playing this minuet from Anna Magdalena Bach, how do I work on the sound here? Well, the first thing I probably should play hands separately. This is actually very, very important when we work on sound, to play hands separately, not because we want to simplify something for ourselves or we are not capable of playing hands together. Perfectly capable of playing hands together. But when we work on sound, just separating your hands will give you a chance to really listen to what is going on in each hand. And even though obviously here, right hand is a main melody, even though we all know that Bach's music is polyphonic music where every voice is independent. Yes, but still, here in this particular minuet, right hand have a little bit more melodic importance. But left hand still is important, right? Because it can, even though my right hand can play beautifully, if left hand was not trained properly, right, it can start making unnecessary accents, right? And it can actually spoil my beautiful melody. So that's why it's so important to give this sound tuning to each hand before we are ready to put hands together. We were talking about hand position, right? The importance of that. And in the first lecture, we were talking about being conscious of how I make every sound. And I mentioned briefly that before you even play a note, you ideally want to prepare it, right? Prepare it kind of inside of you, inside your head, inside your heart. And only then you play. And then you'll be very, very attentive to, how you're going to play, right? So actually, what we're going to try to do, and in order to be better pianists, is try to develop more sensitivity in our fingers, right? So the finger is very sensitive to the key. So I play slowly. And if I have good hand position and my thumb is not laying on the key, that's the worst thing that you can do. The thumb needs to be light and tall. So if my thumb is light, I will definitely not make this accent, right? See, it's so easy to just fall on this note if thumb is too low. So that's why um, I need a nice round hand position, so I can all my fingers can be in equal position, and that will help me not to make any unnecessary accents, right? Because if it is, and it's important to also, just like I said, be the boss of your hand, the boss of your fingers, and make sure the hand is not doing this back and forth kind of thing. So actually, it stays in this position, but we don't want the hand to be locked in it, right? It's not a prison. So your hand needs to be able to move freely. So there are two basic motions that we want to acquire and develop, right? And hopefully it will become natural for you to use. The first motion is the motion of the elbow, right? Wherever my melody goes, my hand is always followed. And this is something that you can even do when you play hand exercise. Even though it feels like there could be nothing that's more technical than hand exercise, it's so boring, right? But even this hand exercise, we want to try to be conscious and of what sound we create, right? So wherever my melody goes, my elbow and my wrist will follow. The wrist is super, super important part of our hand. And this is the motion number one. Motion number two is something that you can call, for example, a roll. I don't know what's the better word for this. It's like rolling your wrist. So in this minuet, again, there are plenty opportunities for those basic motions. The first one, my wrist follows, and then when I have those repeated notes, see, I'm going to use my wrist. If I don't, see, it's gonna start sounding mechanical. This is actually a very important takeaway from this lecture, is that we want to, number one, make sure our fingers are sensitive to the keys, right? We are very conscious. And also, we want to make sure that we almost treat our hand as a musical instrument, right? And so the hand is actually very expressive, and it constantly moves, even though it does stay in this position, but it constantly moves. It's very lively, and it is very following, just like the river, right? It's moving and turning. It's following the course of the melody. So the hand is always involved. That will definitely help us to create a better sound. That concludes our second lecture. So let's try to be, number one, very attentive, how we play, how we press the keys, right? Listen to yourselves, play a little bit slower, and make sure we start exploring those, direction of the melody, the course of the melody. And let's try to incorporate those two basic motions in our hand is the elbow and the wrist motion. But I want to tell you, please don't exaggerate those motions too, right? You don't want to do something like this, right? Because again, everything needs to be natural, organic, and beautiful, and very sensitive. So it's important to have a good balance of what is right and not take it too far. Okay? Thank you so much. I will see you in the next lecture.